What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be a sort of beginner's guide to filming. When I first started filming, I often found that I jumped into things head first and I didn't take the right precautions before I started filming, so I always ended up having to fix things in post, or sometimes I'd even have footage that was unusable. So if you are just starting out and you're just getting into this trade, into the filmmaking world, take this as a sort of checklist of really important things to consider before you start recording. So in order to show you the things that are on my checklist, I've basically set up this fake interview. And this was just the best way to do it, as we're in Scotland and we're in another national lockdown, so I thought we'd just make the most of what we can do.
Over the last year, many people have spent their time in almost complete isolation. This is David. David has been stuck at home for the best part of 10 months now. His days are now filled with monotonous tasks, eating out of boredom, and staring into the refrigerator for what seems like a record amount of time. We've sat down with David to dive deep into the mind of what we believe to be one of the world's most bored individuals.
So the first thing to do before really anything else is you need to make sure you've got good framing. So obviously make sure you have the nicest composition possible, but you also need to be aware of what's in the background. Make sure that there's nothing unwanted lurking in the background before you start shooting. I've been in a lot of situations where I just haven't noticed something. I've checked the shot, but I just haven't noticed something in the background, and it's killed me when it came to the editing process, and I wish that I just took that extra second to have a little look and make sure I moved anything unwanted from the frame before I started the filming. Depending on what you're filming, you might want to take into consideration the rule of thirds grid. So for this, when I'm filming an interview, I'll usually put the subject on the left line or the right line, and just have them facing across camera, across the other way. Because if you do it the other way around, it just doesn't look appealing. It looks like the person's kind of looking off frame, and you don't want that. So for interviews, I would go with the rule of thirds grid and try and use this to your advantage. Just make sure that you have it the way that's most pleasing to the audience and the one that makes most sense to the audience. So for me, the second thing I'll look out for is focus. I'll make sure that my focus is perfect. Now, for this shot, I'm probably going to use autofocus because the autofocus in my camera is actually really quite good, and the subject's not really moving a lot, so I'm probably just going to track to their face, and it should do a really good job of just holding it. It's similar to the way I'm filming this part of the video. But if you don't have really good autofocus in your camera, you can use manual focus. So you would want to set your focus beforehand. Use something like the peaking, if you've got peaking in your camera, just to make sure that the focus is perfect. And then just make sure your subject doesn't move too far away from the camera, doesn't move out of that focus plane. So really, depending on what kind of thing you're filming, you have to make that decision of what is the best focus settings for this type of shot. And you'll learn that just through trying them all, trial and error, and seeing what works best for what situation. But really take that extra minute just to look at your focus, make sure it's perfect, because there's nothing worse than a shot that's just slightly out of focus, just slightly soft. You'll end up just binning that clip because you'll just hate it when you're messing about with it in the editing process. So next up would be getting your exposure right. And if you've ever underexposed an image or overexposed an image, you'll know just how hard it is to try and get that back. You can really end up ruining your shot just trying to compensate for an under or overexposed image. If you're using a camera that has zebras or a histogram or anything really that will help you make sure that your exposure is perfect, definitely use it, because you don't want to be stuck in that position. So again, before you hit record, just take a minute to check your exposure, make sure it's leveled out nicely. You might need to adjust your lights or just take into consideration the environment you're in, but it's really important to get this right. Now, one of the most important things to set correctly in pretty much all situations is your white balance. If you don't set your white balance correctly, you're going to end up with some really strange colours, and the footage is going to look completely different to what you wanted it to look like. Most cameras have an automatic white balance setting, but I would kind of avoid using this, as you don't really want your shots to have different white balances as the light changes, because if you have it on auto, it's just going to change on its own, and then you're going to end up with different colours, different portions of the video that you've selected. I would find what white balance you need, and I would set it, and I would stay there. Get yourself one of these grey cards. This basically allows you to set the proper white balance to whatever situation you're in, especially if you're doing like an interview and you've got your lights all set up. You just need to hold this in front of your talent, and you should be able to set that from within your camera. These cost about like, I don't know, 5 or 10 quid off Amazon, so I find myself using that all the time, so it's really worthwhile if you don't have one to pick one up. So this wouldn't be a complete checklist without mentioning audio at least once. So before you start filming, if you're going to be filming any audio, I'd advise you to do some audio checks right before. Just, you know, record anything, record a little bit of your subject speaking or a little bit of the background noise that you're going to be recording. Just make sure there's nothing annoying, nothing overpowering, just basically nothing wrong with the audio, and doing these checks will save you in so many occasions. I would always suggest monitoring your audio whenever you can, so just plugging a pair of headphones into your camera or your recorder and then just listen to it throughout, so if anything goes wrong you'll hear it first and then you can make an adjustment. Probably the biggest audio issues that I've had, like a person speaking too loud into a microphone and then it ends up all distorted and it doesn't sound great, so just make sure that the levels are coming in nice and balanced exactly to where you want them to be, and then you'll have no issues when you're editing the end product. A little bonus to consider is just the obvious: make sure you have enough battery in your camera, enough battery in your lights, and enough storage space on your memory card before you start. Thanks for watching, I hope you guys enjoyed. I know some of this stuff is sort of beginner tips, but you know, if you are starting out, it's stuff to keep in mind when you're out there in the field. It'll keep you right. If you did enjoy the video, please consider leaving it a like, and if you haven't, subscribe to the channel for more content. I'll see you guys in the next one.